Good morning. Today is the 13th day of the first Adar, the 22nd of February. We are up to the fifth reading of Tetzaveh. And today what we're going to do is look at a number of things in the fifth reading that are related to the fifth sphira, the sphira that we call Hod in Hebrew, and which is sometimes we translate usually as acknowledgement or thanksgiving. You'll find in a lot of places that they translate it as splendor. It's looking at the different meanings of this word. There's actually 5 different meanings. We don't use all of them, but it has 5 different meanings. One of them is that a Jew comes from the word Hod. Hod is a Yehudi. What is he acknowledging? What is he admitting to? And a Jew, it says in the Talmud, and this is very relevant to today, the 13th day of the first Adar is like the same thing as the 13th day of the second Adar. It's just a shadow of it. It's a smaller version. And on that day we would have been fasting for the fast of Esther, Ta'anit Esther. And so we're getting into the spirit of Purim. And the first person who's really called by this as a Jewish person, Ish Yehudi, is Mordechai. And the sages say, why is he called an Ish Yehudi? Why is he called a Jew? Not because he was from the tribe of Judah, because if he was from the tribe of Judah, he couldn't be from Benjamin, which is what tribe he's from. So he's called an Ish Yehudi because he's modeh, he admits that idolatry is empty, and he admits only to one God. So it's like what we've been saying, that Hod means acknowledgement, to acknowledge, to admit. Lehodot al haemet, to admit the truth, to acknowledge the truth. So let's look at 2 different things here that have to do with this. There's a lot more in the article. There's a few more, but let's take the first one. The first one is the language, the special language used to describe the continuity of priesthood. Priests also have to have continuity, and at some point Aaron will die, he will pass from the world, and in this case his grandson took over, Elazar, but somebody has to take over. And there's a whole issue in Judaism about inheritance of these special positions. So we know that in monarchy, the king is supposed to be inherited by his son. Or if it's not his son, it's the next blood relative, and so on. This is the usual way in which these special positions in the people are passed on from generation to generation. The continuity is actually, we're looking for someone who is, you would say, the spitting image of his father. In other words, that there will be a complete extension. Again, repeating what the father did, so the son should also do. That's the general idea. But if you look at chapter 29, verse 30, you'll see that the Torah uses a very particular phrase, and in fact, even in Moshe Vishnevsky's Chumash, he wasn't able to translate this phrase because it almost doesn't make any sense. And the Torah uses this phrase. Later, it'll use this phrase for other things as well, not in the Torah, but in the prophets. We'll see this idiom used again. But let's look at what this means. It says, I'm going to translate it directly from the Hebrew so you can see the difference. It says 7 days the priest will wear them. It's talking about the garments of the high priest. So after one high priest has passed away, his successor comes. How does he become a high priest? We'll talk about this in a moment. He has to wear the priestly garments, the high priestly garments, for 7 days. And then it says, again, so 7 days, the priest will wear them underneath of his sons. It's a very strange phrase. Underneath of his sons, who will come to the tent of how he calls it, tent of meeting, in order to serve in the sanctuary. What do you mean underneath of his sons? What's this notion of underneath? So the point is that when it comes to the succession of priesthood, and we know that Aaron is the archetype of the fifth sphera, the sphera of acknowledgement, of thanksgiving. When it comes to this sphera, its difference is that its continuity is actually discrete. And by discrete, I don't mean hidden. I mean discrete as in D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E. Discrete. Quantum packets, one after another. Again, these two sphirot, the fourth and the fifth, eternity and acknowledgement, netzach and hod, they always go together. But they're different. So both of them have succession. Both of them have a sense of eternity to them. So when you get, victory, eternity, it's obvious in the name. But what about acknowledgement and thanksgiving? How does that succeed? How is that continual? When it comes to the right side, to the victory, eternity, there the succession is, like I said, the spitting image of his father. And the Talmud describes this as the son is the thigh of his father. That's the image that it wants to give us. Again, this is on the right side, on victory and eternity. This would be in the fourth reading. Their succession is by simply extending what already was. So there's the father, and the one who succeeds him amongst the children is the one that's most like him. So usually what we say is that the firstborn is most like the father. He's the one who's most like him. So that's why it succeeds from father to son through, and usually that's the way it is in monarchy. But here, it's also a son, but the stress is different. He's saying underneath him. It's not the continuity of the thigh is the extension of the torso. It's not a direct continuity. In fact, the whole idea here is the discrete nature of the succession. Each one is something in and of himself. They're not the same. They're not meant to be the same. Each one of the high priests is like a different world altogether. They're discretely connected. There's a discrete function and a continuous function. So the left side is always discrete appearances. Let's take another example. When I say eternity, that in mathematics would be like the infinite. I'm saying infinity in and of itself. But when I say the left side, I mean discrete quantities, which could add up theoretically all the way up to the infinity. But it has to start from discrete quantities. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Keep adding 1 until you get somehow to infinity. It's a different concept altogether. So this is one of the big differences between the left and the right when it comes to victory and acknowledgement. When it comes to the fourth sphere and the fifth sphere of the heart, the victory always is a sense of continuity, and the left side is also a sense of continuity, but not through continuity the way you would see it in mathematics. Rather, it's discrete quantities, one after another. There's another way that we say this when we look at the different areas of human endeavor. So in victory eternity, on the right side, we place education, because education is based on eternal values. On the other hand, in acknowledgement, hod, on the left side, the fifth sphera of the heart, there we place economics. That's the area of human knowledge that relates to acknowledgement. Why? Because economics is always looking at the world not from eternal values, but from the changing quantities in the world. That's what economics is always trying to figure out. It's trying to understand how do the discrete quantities, the money flow in the world, the money existing in the world, how do you manipulate that? How do you use that? How do you make sure there's enough of it? And so on and so forth. So that's one of the differences. And you see this in this special phrase that is given to the continuity of the priesthood. There's another thing that goes with it we just mentioned, and it's that the only thing the high priest has to have is the garments. That's what makes him into a high priest. This is very different from the way that succession would work if it was from the right side. From the right side, we'd say, who's the most similar to the Father? Who is the extension of the Father? Here we're saying it's something entirely different, it's discrete. The only thing that makes him into the high priest is the fact that for 7 days he wears the clothing, the special high priest garments, in the sanctuary. That's it. That's all he needs. What is this good for? So we always say that the inner sense of this fifth sphira of the heart, of acknowledgement, the inner sense is called tmimut. Tmimut can be translated as earnestness, as being an earnest person, being a person of integrity. What makes a person that way? The most important thing is that he doesn't hold from himself, that he doesn't think that he has anything special. And this is very interesting in the succession of the priesthood, that it's done by simply having him wear the garments. There's only one requirement that he has, and that he's a man of integrity. And that simply is that he's God-fearing. He's God-fearing, meaning he doesn't hold from himself. He fears God. A person who fears God is someone who understands that everything that he has is from God. And so therefore he is a man of integrity. He has earnestness in him. And so that's exactly the quality that we're looking for, that he can just don the clothing and say, I am the high priest only by merit of having worn the clothing for 7 days in the sanctuary. None of my accomplishments matter. It's not whether I'm a scholar, or I'm wealthy, or I'm this, or I'm that. None of these things. It's simply the fact that I wore the clothing made me into the high priest. And we talked earlier in the week about the importance of clothing and so on, but here we got another look at the clothing, that the clothing is what makes the high priest into who he is. And the same thing is true of Aaron. Regardless of his being Moses' brother, and all his great other accomplishments, he's a prophet, and so on and so forth. What makes him into the high priest is only the fact that he donned the garments for 7 days. That's what makes him into a priest. That is the essence of acknowledgement of earnestness. That the person acknowledges that it is all God's will, not his doing. It's not his accomplishments, not his grandeur. Thanks for joining today. Hope to see you tomorrow again. We'll still do it at 3:15, an hour earlier. So I'll see you tomorrow, God willing.
I can ask a question.